Hi, everybody. Welcome. Uh, my name is DJ Hopkins. I'm a professor at San Diego State University, and I'm going to share my screen.
And I do have like a little blurb on you, DJ, if you don't mind me
Oh, yeah, go right
reading it for
ahead.
you. Okay. So this is Dr. DJ
Thanks.
Hopkins. You're welcome. You did it for me, so thank you. He's a professor at San Diego State University. His research includes Shakespeare and performance and theater in urban contexts. His current research includes immersive theater and virtual reality. And take it away, John. Or I'm sorry, DJ.
Thanks. John will take it away in about 13 minutes. So, yeah, thank you so much, Melissa. I really appreciate that. The title of my talk today is Very Real Imaginary Friends, Virtual Reality Live Performance, and the Problem of Immersive Research. My presentation will start kind of in the middle of things, and then I'm going to scroll back and provide a little context before lurching forward again. So just so you know how this is going to go. Preface. At the end of fall 2021, my honors seminar students threw themselves into assignments that required team research in virtual worlds. I spent the first parts of that course establishing frames of reference, introducing students to the idea of immersive experiences, considering iconic examples of live immersive performance, and then guiding the students' subsequent VR research. Final projects took the form of group fieldwork in various VR apps. During the presentation of their research findings, enthusiasm for the work and support for each other was palpable. As one student put it in her end of semester reflection, over the course of this class, I was able to defamiliarize and reformulate my understandings of theater, virtual reality, the classroom experience, and my role within each of those spaces. That was a gratifying response. Obviously, not every student is quite so metacognitively self-aware, but most of my students' final projects demonstrated the capacity to work in a collaborative context, collect data as a team within a virtual environment, often a surreal virtual environment that resisted comprehension, let alone data collection, evaluate that data as a group, and present their findings to the rest of the class. Most of the time, they even seem to be having fun. Here's the conclusion to my preface. The students to whom I set these assignments were not only completing projects for a class, they were also helping me to develop a research methodology that I myself am only just beginning to wrap my head around. Team research in immersive worlds, whether virtual or actual. Context. I generally identify as a theater scholar. Prior to the pandemic, I didn't know what Zoom was. Prior to the pandemic, I was certain that the ontology of performance centered on liveness and the co-presence of actors and audience, and I would not have accepted that anything in virtual reality could be regarded as theater, let alone live. Well, it's 2.5 years later, isn't it? And I barely even recognize my own perspective pre-pandemic. As evidence, in 2020 and 2021, I convened a lecture series called Digital Shakespeares. The series was presented over Zoom in collaboration with SDSU's Digital Humanities Center. It included inspiring lectures from Dr. Gina Bloom and Dr. Elizabeth Hunter, each of whom spoke about a Shakespeare video game that she designed. All the scholars in the series, including Bloom and Hunter, shared research that framed Shakespeare's works as dynamic sources for new performances and new educational experiences. These projects demonstrated a principle that I consider foundational. Live performances, virtual spaces, and classrooms of all kinds can be sites for the production of knowledge and for the kind of productive fun that sociologist Adam Grant associates with creating together and solving problems together. Following this example, I often use Shakespeare's in the plural to emphasize the multiplicity and fluidity of Shakespeare studies as a field and Shakespeare's texts as a resource for cultural and theatrical production. So today, I'm going to talk about two examples of Shakespeare performance very briefly in two different media. The first, virtual reality, the second, immersive theater. I'll share some of the pleasures and problems of each. And in doing so, I'll conclude by introducing a broader problematic, the challenge of conducting performance research in immersive worlds. Many of you may already be familiar with the VR app, The Underpresents. Maybe throw up some sort of digital reaction if you know what The Underpresents is. In case you don't, The Underpresents is a bonkers, surreal, immersive VR game world produced by the media production team Tenderclaws. The essential ingredient to The Underpresents is participation. You must explore the world of the under, or nothing in this game world will happen for you. The Underpresents attracted a lot of attention when it launched in 2019, so it was newsworthy when this esoteric VR experience announced an expansion package of sorts. Early in the pandemic, The Underpresents released an adaptation of a play by Shakespeare. The Underpresents Tempest was a synchronous, immersive VR Shakespeare experience that opened in June of 2020. Tempest was a one-person performance of a very loose adaptation of Shakespeare's play, The Tempest. Tempest offered substantial opportunity for its audience to participate in storytelling. In fact, there's so much participation that calling Tempest a one-person performance, as I just did, seems inaccurate. Let's try again. One professional actor led an audience of about half a dozen Underpresents players in a virtual theater production that traced the contours of Shakespeare's play, occasionally surfaced characters, and sometimes even included lines from the text. At times, I found the Underpresents Tempest to be positively tedious. Everybody in the audience was continually snapping their fingers because that's what players in the Underpresents do. But I wasn't there to be a player. I just wanted to be an audience member. I had to remind myself that I really wasn't there looking for insights into Shakespeare. In this case, Shakespeare was just a springboard for insights into something else, a tool for critical inquiry. Attached as I was initially to expectations of theatrical spectatorship, I almost missed the point of Tempest, because the Underpresents Tempest was about community. The professional actor that I saw, seen here, Caitlin Schiller audibly cried through most of what turned out to be her closing performance. As she explained in her very first speech, quote, "We've all become imaginary friends to each other. Very real imaginary friends." This weird digital community theater Shakespeare improv meant something to Schiller, and it meant something to the players performing in her audience as well. As it turns out, Tenderclaw's co-founder Samantha Gorman is a theater-loving game designer and media scholar. She occasionally tweets with the hashtag #VRTheater. Gorman cites the live immersive theater production Sleep No More as a particular inspiration for aspects of the Underpresents. Maybe throw up a digital reaction if you know what Sleep No More is. At a theater conference, I would never need to explain what Sleep No More is. But you may ask, what's Sleep No More? Sleep No More is a dance theater adaptation of Shakespeare's tragedy Macbeth, with many of that play's plot points, characters, and themes distributed over 100,000 square feet of renovated warehouse space. A production of Sleep No More has been running in New York City for more than 10 years. Produced by the British theater company Punchdrunk, Sleep No More has become the iconic example of live immersive theater. Sleep No More is relevant to a discussion of new media performance because it offers an opportunity to consider what 21st century audiences can do with bodies and spaces, technology. In fact, my forthcoming Sleep No More book project takes remediation as a key concept for understanding this seemingly analog, live, immersive Shakespeare performance, understanding it in relation to new media. Shakespeare has been invoked for centuries to authorize theater experiments, and more recently to, this slide is out of order, sorry, and more recently to legitimize new media, from early film to expanded uses of virtual reality. In common with the underpresents, Sleep No More demands a great deal of participation. Significant functional and navigational interactivity is required on the part of the audience participant if the experience of Sleep No More is to happen at all. Theater scholar Josephine Méchon uses a number of terms to refer to those who attend immersive theater, most notably audience participant. See if I can get back to the right slide. Yeah. For Méchon, the audience participant of immersive theater is able to fashion their own narrative and journey through an absorbing, even transporting experience. Elizabeth Hunter compares the experience of Sleep No More to what she calls an active spectatorship, in which an audience member or game player has a continuous participatory role that can impact the outcome of a theater performance or a game. Audience engagement is the goal of most participatory experiences in VR and immersive theater alike. These phrases, an active spectator and audience participant, derived from game design and immersive theater respectively, are nuanced conceptions of the practice of audiencing, and they've proven particularly valuable tools for my students doing VR fieldwork. My conclusion. This presentation traces the trajectory of my own engagement with virtual reality, which I've approached out of research in live theater. After years of working in immersive performance and more recently turning to virtual reality, I've come to focus on a key feature shared by virtual reality and IRL immersive experiences. Both forms trouble traditional research methodologies. If you were to come to virtual reality from, say, film studies, or if you come to immersive theater from, say, the study of dramatic literature, you'll quickly discover research problems that don't come up if you're watching a 2-hour film or going to see a play. It's practically impossible for a single person to experience the full scope of a large-scale immersive world like the Underpresents or Sleep No More. I've seen Sleep No More 9 times. Even so, I rarely know the names of the actors who played the characters in any given performance. In fact, sometimes I'm not even clear on the names of the characters. Compare that statement to more traditional subjects of research. It would be shocking to hear a scholar say that same thing of a film by Hitchcock or a play by Shakespeare. My disciplinary knowledges afford me the capacity to contextualize Sleep No More in broader discourses, especially Shakespeare performance. And more narrowly, what I know allows me, at least on my own, by myself, to see the value in recontextualizing Sleep No More in terms of a complex dynamic between live performance and remediation. Nevertheless, there are superfans who know way more about the details of Sleep No More than I do. So the question then is, now that I know I can't really do it alone, where does my immersive experience scholarship go from here? In my seminar on immersive experiences, I take my students along a version of my own trajectory, introducing new concepts and defamiliarizing forms that my students may take for granted. And then I turn them loose in teams where they explore VR worlds, attend immersive theater, and experiment with new research methodologies. They work together to map expansive virtual spaces. They scour Discord channels for useful information. I certainly wasn't taught such research methodologies in grad school, but they now strike me as some of the skills that young scholars will need when exploring the immersive worlds of their media landscape. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DJ. That was very interesting. Does anyone have any questions? It looks like we have 7 minutes.
Well, I mean, I have a, I have a question. Is like from a, I'm aware of several small companies or troops, or whatever you want to call them, or doing independent theater in VR, that put on shows in VR chat or other platforms. And I wondered if you're tracking those or what you think, because I think traditional theater, one of the hardest parts is finding a stage, right, and finding a place to perform. So I think
Yeah.
VR kind of levels that playing field. But are you seeing lots of that activity out there of independent theater people making VR art?
Yeah, I do see, it's yes, short answer, yes. I do see independent theater happening. Um, it becomes a variation on the how do I find a stage question? Like, how do I get the infrastructure to run my VR experience with all the necessary gadgetry? Maybe the bar to entry is a little bit lower, but I think it's really just a kind of horizontal move. Of course, access is really different. I mean, there's an entire festival of online art, Folda, and I've seen a site-specific theater, a live synchronous site-specific theater thing that took me to downtown Toronto, but I stayed here in my office in San Diego. And I know most of the artists were broadcasting from Toronto as they did that live. So I think that sort of thing is interesting. You don't have to just drive somewhere. You can be there, so to speak, from many places. I'm also seeing a really interesting development. Mostly I've seen this in larger theater contexts that kind of hybridizes the form where audience members will go to a location, be given a VR headset and controllers, and they go through a VR experience that is also mapped onto physical space. So there will be moments where I reach out my avatar's virtual hand and an actual hand takes my actual hand, which kind of boggles my mind a little bit. I can't, I haven't personally done that kind of hybrid live VR experience. I know that there's a whole VR lab at the National Theatre in London that's experimenting with different kinds of digital storytelling. And I have a colleague here in San Diego who's trying to find ways to experiment with live synchronous theater in virtual spaces. Um, what I'm really recognizing is that large scale immersive experiences, whether you're talking about a big show by a well financed company like Punch Drunk, Sleep No More, or their new show in London, Burnt City, or some really expansive virtual reality world, um, it it creates a research problem that needs DH solutions. It requires a team of researchers or it requires kind of crowdsourcing all the data posted by superfans on Discord and other social media outlets and kind of scraping the internet for information. But as I said in my conclusion, those are methodologies that are unfamiliar to me, that are new to me, and that my students and now some of the research team that I'm putting together are developing. And certainly in the field in which I'm primarily located, that's pretty new. Even just publishing with multiple authors is something that causes raised eyebrows. So I think it's a challenge to conventional research methodologies, at least in my field. Thanks for the question, John. Melissa, if there aren't any other questions, maybe we can go to John's presentation.
Yeah, it was a great idea. Just thinking about that too. Okay, John Oakes is from San Jose State University Library. He joined the library in December of 2018 as our tech lab coordinator after a career in enterprise sales and consulting with venture-backed startups focusing on emerging technology. John is interested in all emerging tech for its educational and economic potential and to try to apply ethical, accessibility, and inclusive lenses to how we view and implement these new platforms. Oh, looks like you're muted there, John.
Speaker 101 is unmute. Okay, hi. So in a few minutes here, or for the next few minutes, I will be basically going through here. Let's see, I'm just going to share my screen, and we'll start out. I was kind of inspired by Christina's talk today. So this is going to be how it's made, social mobile 3D VR app talk. And by all means, because I'm going to get on a roll here, interrupt me, ask questions. If something's not clear or you can't hear me, I won't be offended. In fact, I would appreciate it. So we're going to go through, and I'm going to walk through how we did the Festival of Lanterns, which is one of the first virtual projects the library did when I was here. It was right at the start of COVID. We had no idea how we were going to manage all of these in-person or formerly in-person exhibits and experiences. So we tried to do some in virtual reality, and I'm going to talk about how we did it, but also some of the things we learned. And I'm going to echo some of the points that some of the other speakers have made. And so yeah, if there's a couple links here, and we'll share that, but you can go to our website and access this. And I'm going to bring up a copy right now. So here's our website where you can go and look for it. It's library.sjsu.edu. There's a bunch of different rooms, and the project was really around the idea of taking these beautifully hand-painted lanterns that had been scheduled to be put into our library so students and the public could walk through and look at them at a time when the library was closed. Nobody had access. Nobody could come in, nobody could put up the lanterns, and we had no way of showing them. So the sponsor of the project was Akna, and the artist that I worked with mostly was Bobby McConney, who's a faculty member at San Jose State. We got together and brainstormed how we could maybe do a virtual exhibit. And what we came up with was to do some photogrammetry and capture these lanterns remotely. I've never even seen these lanterns before, but we were able to do it and make a virtual environment. And just to kind of show you where we're heading, this is what it ended up looking like, and then we'll talk about how we did it. So this is a live virtual environment. It's still going strong. We have 8 rooms and 70 different lanterns that you can walk around, and if I turned it on, there's also music and a live PowerPoint presentation that talks about each of the themes, and there's lanterns for each theme, and they're really beautiful. I mean, they're amazing works of art, and they're even better when you see them in person finally, but this gave people a chance to experience what it was like and kind of get up close to them without having to come to the library. So in terms of how we made it, I'm going to dive into that a little bit. And the idea here is I'd like you to know that I'm going to tell you everything you need to know to do one of these yourself after this talk. There's there's like an infinite road of possibilities, but to get started, it's very simple. We used a technique called photogrammetry, and there's free software which you can use, but basically because we couldn't, because I wasn't able to get together with the lanterns, Bobby made this little, a Lazy Susan, a turntable for her lanterns on a black background, and filmed them. And filmed them in 2 different directions, kind of one going this way and the other going, the polar 90-degree rotation. And she did that 70 times. She spent probably 12 hours doing these slow rotations of these lanterns, and you can see some of the detail. We ran into some challenges, like you can get into the details of the glare and the lights and so forth, but we were able to do it. And then what I was able to do from these videos is then have to reshare my screen here. Is extract the stills from the video and use the software. I use the software called 3DF Zephyr, but there's lots of different things. And photogrammetry allows you to take the pictures and project them onto each other, and they use some very advanced geometry to figure out where they are in space. And if you see here, if you can see the little blue dots, each one of those is a camera position. And what we get is a 3D model that we can see from any perspective. And it's pretty good resolution. So we were able to do that for 70 lanterns. And first thing one of the lessons I'd like to point out right now is, if you're doing a project like this, don't do 70 of anything. I mean, we would have been very happy. Bobby would have been happy. I would have been happy if we just would have done like 10 and made our lives a lot easier. But we were trying to replicate the real world. And the thing about VR is it's a really good experience, but less is more. You want to really focus and do a top quality job on the fewest number of things you can get away with, at least at first, to make sure that you're really hitting it out of the park. So, so we're able to do this and create these models, and then what you get out of that is a nice little clean model after you take away any of the leftover bits and bytes. And from there, we are able to put it into an app, which is, okay, make sure I'm still sharing, called Mozilla Hubs. And I think many of you have already run across Mozilla Hubs. I think it's a great product. Mozilla Hubs is a open source 3D software that comes, and they give you a website called Spoke, which is what you're looking at here, which is an editor that lets you build 3D spaces without having to write any code. There's no code. I never had to open a compiler or do anything. I would just literally upload a lantern to GitHub, and which is here. I put those shapes that I created from the photogrammetry into GitHub into different galleries, and then just link the GitHub link for the graphic, and it would appear here. They host it. It's free. You can also host your own service, but it's automatically gives you, and DJ, by the way, multi-user. You could prototype a stage or play here really easily without any extra work. Bring in props from the internet and have yourself a little show. I mean, this will hold 40 people without collapsing. So it's a nice little venue, and this is really important for this project. Other projects I had done had been single user. They really wanted this to be multi-user so that people could come in and talk to each other and have basically online classes here. So we designed 8 of these rooms, and then we're able to publish it. And let's see here. So then, this is what the final product was able to be produced. Now, so that's kind of like the quick version of how we made this. This was in 2020 basically, right when the pandemic started, and it's just 2 years later, and there's already a wealth of tools available that are even better than this. And I wanted to just give you a sneak peek on some of them. So if I was going to redo this today, I might use Hubs because it's still very good for what it does, and it's a nice product. But I also want to just call out, there's some new ones coming. By the way, this is all web-based. One of the important things about publishing things online for VR is not everybody has VR. So it needs to be web-based. It needs to be accessible by a smartphone or a low-end laptop. It's fantastic in VR. It's a better experience in VR, but you can't leave people behind. So Hubs is a great choice for that. But also there's a tool it's relatively new called Needle Tools. And this is a really beautiful engine that's just emerging. And and you're able to, and we can look at the showcase here. This is a website, and you could look at this in VR. If we were all together, or if you had a VR headset, we could open up a VR website and be in this room looking at this bike together. And this is just a demo app, but I mean, the graphic fidelity is amazing. The performance is amazing. So the possibilities of putting content that we might want to scan or create or import is really starting to take off. So that's just one I wanted to highlight that's worth remembering. And it's a good URL. It's needle.tools. I'm not sure how they came up with a needle, but it's easy to remember. Another one is a little bit more involved, but I wanted to raise it up because it's got some nice free tools capability. It's called the Ethereal Engine, which is based on XR Foundation, which is an open source project. So you can just take their code and build your own thing if that's what you want. A little more high end, but some very, very advanced capabilities. And there are, let's see, I want to just share. Where's my Zoom share button? There it is. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, and again, this is a website. This is just a very quick loading 3D website. This is supposed to be, a car showroom, and it's just a demo site. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but the idea is you can have multi-user 3D experiences that work on a phone, laptop, or VR, and deploy your content. And because it's all open source, because it's all relatively standard file types, you can archive it. You can archive these shapes. You can zip it all up into a zip file and archive it for future generations. Nothing's proprietary, which I really, really like. And so the go back over here. And so there's a bunch of other ones there too that you can go to. If you go to the etherealengine.com and look at their showcases, it's pretty impressive. Now, the last thing, because I know time is short, never have enough time on these things, I wanted to mention is that there are also, lost my tab. I'll just go back here. There are also some other tools that will use traditional game engines like Unity or Unreal that don't require a lot of coding to get started. But to begin your journey, and this is something I think you should try it, even if it's not something you're going to do professionally or do all the time. If you just go to hubs.mozilla.com, just this part, and you can just create a room on your own, just using somebody else's design, and give it a try. It's fun, and you'll kind of feel like you can do this because you can create a room really quickly. This is just a generic room. I can bring in my own content, and then you can invite people by sending them a link. Like for example, I could put this into chat right now. There's my chat. So I'm going to put this into chat. Where's chat? And that room is live. I just created it. It took me 2 seconds. You saw me do it. If anybody feels brave, oops, I just sent that just to Jill. Let me send it to everybody now. There's the link. So if you clicked on that link, you could join me in this room and we could chat and walk around and have a good time. So I guess the main point I'd like to leave you with, although there's an infinite amount of capabilities out there for VR, it's really easy to get started and play around and just do simple things. Don't try to overreach, start small. It's a very powerful experience. Students love it, so much better than Zoom. If you are a teacher or you lead a class, experiment with this, get comfortable with it. And then instead of a Zoom session, do a Hubs session with your students or your colleagues. They'll have a great time and they'll be talking about it for days. And it'll feel very cutting edge. It's kind of like making Rice Krispie treats. It's not that hard, but people are still impressed. So I recommend you do it, have fun with it, and then from there, explore all the other platforms that are out there, because VR is coming. It's the big industries have spoken, and they really are encouraging development into the space, and it is a really powerful tool for learning, experiencing, for theater, for game playing, and it's going to be a big deal. So anyway, that's kind of what I had. I don't know if anybody else has any questions, but I think I hit my time more or less.
Thank you, John. Yes, we have 6 minutes to spare, so you're good.
Yeah, and anybody has any questions at all about VR, or it doesn't have to be about this, just feel free. Opinions. I have lots of opinions about VR.
Well, I have a question if no one else has anything.
Okay.
I guess for both of you, what are like the biggest challenges that you've run into with VR, and what challenges are there with VR and accessibility? Like in terms of, because you mentioned how, it's kind of challenging for everyone to have a VR headset. What like challenges have you run into? How have you overcome them, or like what are you still maybe grappling with?
Well, for me, the industry is still not great on accessibility when it comes to true like VR. I mean, we don't really have built-in solutions for mobility or hearing impaired or vision impaired folks. We can work with it, and it's something I think that's important when you build these projects. Building a website that's has the comparable information that can be more accessible for people who are hearing or vision impaired, but it is something that I think is going to be more important as 3D interaction becomes a part of it. We're going to have to, just like we've had to adapt some of our physical world resources for people with disabilities or accessibility issues, we're going to have to design our VR experiences with the similar mindset. And so far that's not happening, but I'd like to see more of it.
Thanks, John. Melissa, I guess I have two responses. On the pragmatic side, a colleague of mine who is a theater producer, I'm a theater scholar. I don't work in theater making anymore, but a colleague of mine who does, his complaint is that as he puts it, the front door is always closed and often locked. Which he's using an analogy of, if you finally get to the theater, you can just open the door and walk in, and there's the lobby, and somebody hands you your ticket, or you hand your ticket to somebody and you go to the theater. If you're trying to do some sort of VR, the way to access is always very rough and has multiple steps. And he's always trying to figure out what's the way to make the access to the VR experience, whatever it is, smoother. So that I think is one question. And certainly, as John was saying, now that the major corporations, including Meta, formerly Facebook, I mean, Facebook is a great example. Quite recently, one of the largest and most capitalized technology companies in the world changed its logo to VR goggles and has gone all in on VR. So as John was saying, VR's here, or at least the tech companies have decided VR is where they're going, even if it isn't quite here yet. So it will soon be everywhere. From my perspective as a scholar, there are just historiographical challenges. There's methodological challenges that, as I mentioned in my presentation, that just force me to reconceptualize my role as a scholar, to think about my role as an end user. If I go to a conventional theater and sit in a comfy chair on a Saturday night, I don't think of myself as a user. But honestly, like, my position as a user of theater, of VR theater, of a virtual reality game, of a video game, how I conceptualize my role really influences how I perceive the experience. So thinking about methodologies, thinking about reception are all challenged in ways that I find exciting and present opportunities for new research tools.
Thank you. If anyone has questions, are happy to put it in the chat.
Anyone feeling bold enough to create their own virtual space? You should give it a try. I'm really curious here before we go, who has been in VR, who's put on VR headsets and had an experience versus just, yeah, me. So it's still pretty, David, Jill and Laurel, you're on my list. I'm going to hunt you down, and Melissa too. Give you guys a demo. They work in my library. So anyway, yeah, give it a try. Find your Google Cardboard doesn't count. I'm going to say. I don't want to say Google Cardboard does not count anymore. It used to count. It doesn't count anymore.
All right, it looks like we're being asked to come back. So
Yeah. Well,
But
thanks
thank you.
everybody. DJ,
Thank
great
you.
talk. I enjoyed it. I'm going to reach out to you. So talk to
Likewise,
you
John.
soon.
Yeah,
Alrighty.
let's be in touch.
Alrighty.
Thanks,
Thanks.
everybody. Thank you,
Bye,
Melissa.
everybody.
thank you.
Bye.